How do you get first blood and turn that 1 kill into 10 kills? How do you go from 20 CS ahead of your opponent to then being 50 CS ahead? What's up, GameLeap? Ooh, the Chiz back at it, and in today's video, you are going to learn how to stomp the top lane and convert your leads into easy free wins. So let's get right into it, and the game we are watching is of Suning's Bin, one of the most elite top laners in the world, and he is about to put this Jax in the bin on Aurelia and the Renekton in the bin on Gnar. So at level 1, in the Jax Aurelia game, he immediately runs into this middle lane brush, so he stops Jax from potentially cheesing him from the next brush when he walks to lane. This is a great tactic when the enemy champion is stronger at level 1. Now Bin realizes that Jax is likely going to face check these brushes, knowing he wins a level 1 fight, so as the minions come into lane, he wards this brush and stands on the other side of this alcove wall. Because he is out of Jax's vision, obviously it's impossible for Jax to trade with a weaker Aurelia, so Bin avoids any real confrontation at level 1, which is ideal when you are never going to win those early trades. It's also worth noting that Bin doesn't skill any ability until he shows himself, and this is because you never know what might happen. It's a good habit to get into. But when Jax's character all of a sudden locks onto Aurelia and starts charging at her, this is when Bin skills his E, stuns Jax, autos while he's stunned, and walks away. By doing this far away from the minion wave in this brush, he takes no creep aggro, and if Jax happened to counter-strike and stun Aurelia, Aurelia is in a very safe position regardless. Now because Bin is on cooldown and the wave is pushing into him, his priority is to maintain his HP while staying in XP range of the minions. This is something lots of low elo players don't do. They will still run up and contest the wave despite having no abilities and the minion disadvantage. Preserve that HP. Now when the minions do collide again, you can see that this melee minion is last hittable, but Bin doesn't want to risk trading with Jax, so he positions diagonally opposite his opponent, which is the farthest away he can be, meaning there is less opportunity for Jax to start a fight. But when Bin's E comes back up, he has his disengage back up, so he baits the Jax into walking into him, and exactly the same pattern. He simply stuns him and retreats, but then makes what could potentially be a very big mistake. He runs into melee range of the level 2 stronger Jax and auto attacks him, thereby copying a little bit of minion damage on top of Jax's damage, and it might not look criminal, but there is every chance the enemy jungler could dive off this HP loss alone. That's why when we don't have our cooldowns nor the minion push, we keep hold of as much HP as we can. And if you want more top lane guys, let the Chiz and Co know by smashing that like button down below. Now the minion wave bounces back to this position, and even though Jax is missing, Bin auto attacks and executes this melee minion. But why is that? Well, off this third wave, solo laners will hit level 3. So by killing an enemy minion like this, it guarantees that Bin will hit that power spike first, so even if Jax tried to retaliate, it's impossible. And this alone gives Bin the confidence to engage on Jax as soon as he returns to the lane, and he ends up hard winning this fight. This level up trick is something you have to use to be a great top laner. But Jax isn't the only thing in this lane. Bin has to deal with the minions as well, so after clearing what's left of the cannon wave, he hard shoves the next, so he gives himself time to recall, replenish his mana, and buy items. Notice how he Ws all 6 minions? This pushes the wave faster, and whatever champion you are playing, it's essential to hit as much of the wave as possible with your abilities. Now Jax is about to make a huge mistake, but it's also important to point out here that Bin doesn't teleport back to the lane. Why? Because the wave is pushing back into him, simply because the waves are resetting and Jax is actually in the lane, meaning Jax is damaging the wave and Bin isn't. But Jax is about to commit the cardinal sin, and this is something you are going to see in your games all the time. Instead of recalling himself so he can match Aurelia's time in this lane, Jax tries to shove another minion wave but cannot do it quick enough with just a corrupting potion, so the minions get locked in a very risky position, the big rock. Now it might not be so bad if Aurelia also overstayed, but Aurelia has recalled and bought items, meaning that if these two were to have a round or two, Aurelia 100% wins. So Bin rightfully starts a fight, and even though he should have queued to this minion to dodge Jax's stun, this lane is very close to already being over. Bin also harasses Jax's recall, which is something you can do in your games that might not seem significant, but this is time, and Jax now has to spend another 10 seconds on the map trying to base, and he is going to miss more golden experience for it. At this level, it all adds up. But again, Jax isn't the only influence in this lane. Bin still has to sort out the minion wave, and as you can see, there is a big surplus of blue minions. So Bin freezes the wave by leaving at least 3 range minions alive, and the wave will stay next to this big rock for as long as he wants. Now to make it easier for himself, he should kill this blue cannon minion as soon as possible because it deals the most damage, and it might give Jax a chance to unfreeze the wave, but until Jax comes back to lane, it's simply a matter of last hitting and keeping the blue surplus of minions in this position. But how do I keep the lane frozen when my minions die? Well, one trick you can do that Bin does here is to lead the enemy minions away from your tower, and if you keep them occupied for long enough, by the time you de-aggro the enemy creeps, they don't crash into your tower, and they recollide in exactly the same big rock position. Now Jax returns to lane, and despite being even in terms of items, Ben has the level advantage because he is denied that much golden experience, so instantly fights the Jax, and doesn't even Q him at the end because he's just that alpha. This is how you punish players who push waves that don't reach your tower. Speaking of pushing waves, because Jax has been sorted out, Ben hard pushes but does not go after a turret plate, and this is a move lots of players in lower elos would make. Now why is this so bad hitting the tower? Well, this is tempo, and the quicker Ben shoves the wave, the quicker he can recall, buy items, and get back in the top lane and dominate. If he stays and spends over like 30 seconds hitting the tower and then he tries to recall, he could have been using all of that time hitting Jax and putting him further behind. This is where leads can be thrown, and this is honestly the game-defining play because Ben teleports bot after basing and with his new power gets a triple kill. This does not exist if he's playing with himself under the enemy tower. Now when he returns to the top lane, because he is so much stronger than Jax, he slow pushes this cannon wave, and this keeps the minions further away from Jax's tower, meaning it's riskier for him to come out and CS. Now when the next wave arrives, it's a little different. He shoves this in exactly the same fashion as earlier because he doesn't want this wave to be closer to Jax's tower longer than it has to be, and this creates time to base and finish his Blade of the Rune King. And exactly the same situation arises. Jax doesn't push this wave hard enough, and Ben meets it before it crashes into his tower. So what should he do? That's right, he should freeze it next to this big rock, but he doesn't, and this turns out to be a grave mistake. So if we look at the map for a second, Graves is bot side, Leona and Draven are about to crash into the enemy bot tower, and Syndra is farming under a tower mid, meaning that Aurelia is the only red side champion on the top side of the map. And when we look at the top side of the map, there is no vision here, apart from this tri-brush ward, but there is every chance the enemy team is planning to gank Ben and get a big shutdown, and this is what ends up happening. So if you can ever freeze a wave in the top lane, this would not happen, and it is always going to result in something good. Now Ben is about to redeem himself and get 3 more kills and 40 CS, but who knows why he warded here when he already has the scuttle crab vision? Well, this is because the enemy jungler can sneak past that crab vision if they hug the wall leading to top lane. This trinket just prevents that. Now Ben returns to lane, and what would you do here? Well, if it doesn't involve fighting Jax, then you need help. A level advantage, a significant item advantage, and even though Ben is diving into a big creep wave, this creep aggro means as much as the LCS, especially when he's that far ahead. He gets the kill, and again quickly kills the leftover minions. Now this is where it gets red hot. The enemy Viego shows up, who is level 7, and because Ben doesn't have a significant amount of gold, he stays, and because Leona on my way pings, as you can see, to the top lane, he looks to induce Viego into fighting him, and he picks up another kill. For sure, this might be risky if Leona is not here, but he is 3 levels higher than Viego and has more items, so why not? This is another way you can extend your lead just by isolating giga-weak enemies. Now, if this top lane was more even, hitting these tower plates would be a big waste in tempo because the Rift Herald would get the tower regardless, but because Ben has such a massive lead on the Jax at this point, he doesn't want to give up anything for free, which is why he stays and fights him as soon as the tower goes down, and that's 3 kills in the span of about 90 seconds. So choosing when to fight and then picking the right fight based on the information, these decisions are crucial. Now in the Na Renekton game, we're going to see Ben solo bolos the Renekton, and he does the same thing. He tries to shove the wave, but all of a sudden the Croc TPs back to the wave. Now because Ben's minion wave is so big, there is no way Renekton can hold this up outside of his tower, but just to be sure, Ben hovers for a second, and this is something you should do as well. Escort the wave into the enemy tower if they are threatening to freeze it. Now he returns to lane again with the item advantage in this game, and wants to fight Renekton as much as possible of course, but knowing how to trade with your opponent is also critical. Ben knows that Renekton poses a bit of danger if he can get into melee range, so he saves his hop, his E, for when Dundee looks to gap close. This makes it close to impossible for Renekton to win, and just this alone allows Ben to have complete control over the lane for the next few waves. But lots of players who are not that experienced in the top lane might still be scared of Renekton, but there's no reason to be when you have more HP, better items, and the bigger minion wave. Unless, of course, you have a feeling the enemy jungler is ganking you, as we see Diana show on the map. This is why Ben is now a little more conservative, always moving back and forth, trying to bait Renekton into giving him that information. If Renekton runs at him like a madman, he knows the enemy Diana is about to appear. If he just sits under his tower and does nothing, she probably isn't about to gank. Now, one way you can discourage the enemy jungler from ganking you without doing anything is by placing a fake ward. This is a huge trick. So you run down through the river to where you would normally go if you were to ward this tri-brush, and this looks from the enemy point of view as if you have warded it, and the chances of Diana ganking you are a lot lower as a result. But it's imperative to be aware of the fact that you can still get ganked through the lane itself, and a Diana is perfectly capable of doing so because of her dash. This is why Ben is still playing a little farther back than he normally would, because Diana could well be lane ganking. And completely out of the blue, who would have guessed, this half HP Renekton, who is a level down by the way, decides to jump on Ben's head. And whenever your opponent makes an outrageous move like this, you know they are doing it to bait you into into their jungler. But thankfully in this game, because Nidalee is now in the top lane as well, even though Diana is in this lane brush, like who cares? And they kill them both. Just like all the other kills, Bin shoves until his minions crash, but he decides to give up a bit of tempo on Renekton for turret play gold. Isn't this a mistake? No, this is perfectly fine because he needs that 160 gold for a Sheen and a Kindle gem. So if you do not need that gold from the turret plates, as a rule of thumb, do not waste time hitting the tower plates. This has been the Jizz.